Hi, I'm Jez back and welcome back to another episode of the Cloud Chronicles. With me today is Paul Mackay. He is the VP of Cloud for APAC and EMEA at Cloudera. Hey Paul, great to see you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Thanks very much for having me on.
Brilliant. So for those who don't know, let's have the quick rundown of Cloudera. What do you do? What's the big focus? What's the story?
So Cloudera, we are one of the world's largest data analytics companies. We exist all over the world. We service, the biggest companies across all sectors. We provide a few things. One, we provide a data analytical platform that allows you to do end-to-end data analytics. We allow you to deliver modern data architectures, I think some of which we might talk about later. And we do so in a hybrid model, recognizing that organizations now coexist in this world of on-prem and clouds, whether that's one or multiple. And then finally, AI and machine learning is in our blood. And so moving forward and starting to help organizations take advantage of some of those generative AI technologies and all of that.
Yeah, okay. So there's a couple of things to unpack. I mean, let's go for the classics of hybrid cloud, right? So you said you guys have made a big bet on saying you're chasing down the hybrid cloud, so not pure cloud, the hybrid cloud story. Is that because you see it as a pragmatic reality for enterprises and SMEs, or is it, frankly, you just don't believe that stuff should be on cloud? Or where are you at on that?
Yeah, so we made this kind of bet 4 years ago. Our position, I think the industry has settled that, and we won't be talking about hybrid. It's become the de facto. Most organizations, maybe unless you're born in the last 2 to 3 years, but I've even got examples of where they have had to kind of go in cloud and move back. But most organizations have a number of applications and workloads sit in their data center that they're not going to move for performance, cost, security, or risk reasons. And so being able to work across multiple environments without the kind of the big problem that organizations face around silos. So how do I do things without building like silos of skills or data or postures or machine types? And so hybrid as a idea or as a philosophy or an architecture, in fact, is now something that we believe is here to stay, and that we see most organizations living in a combination of on-prem, the edge, and actually multiple clouds now, not just one.
Yeah, so edge, that's another great classic, isn't it? So with the hybrid cloud story, obviously that makes the challenge around architecture and designing for value. So it's a great trade-off, isn't it? You've got business outcome, technology performance, regulatory governance and compliance factors, including sustainability and cost. And then you've got to trade all those things off. When you are deliberately going for a hybrid view, that does create challenges in terms of creating and maintaining value, because you're skipping across things. Now, before I sort of jump and get you to the question, yes, I'm looking at public cloud vendors who are stripping out their data egress costs and all of those sort of things, but it's way, way bigger than that. I know that's a really cheap shot, but that's not the shot there, right? It's the NAT gateways and all of those the networking stuff.
Right.
So what's your view about how do you balance that? How do you get to value?
Well, so it's interesting, the egress costs, right? The competition authority, said, look, you guys are doing things wrong. It's too complicated. It's too hard. You're locking people in with these big commit to consume contracts. They all go, okay, let's remove the egress costs, but only if you're fully exiting us, right? So taking away this idea of maybe I want to move between clouds, which is quite complicated, but it still provides flexibility and choice. The most important thing that we see, and this has always been true, is about workload placement. So having an idea of what should live where, based on all the points you mentioned, security, posture and governance, economics, but also like profile of workload. Like if I've got something that's bursty, that's going to kind of go on and off, well, maybe that's perfect for public cloud because I'm going to pay for what I use. Whereas that, mission critical, always on system that's sat in a data center somewhere, maybe you don't want to move that because there's going to be an inherent cost associated. But you have to be able to have flexibility and choice so that maybe I can build something in public cloud and that I can then move it back on-prem and run it there in my data center because that's the best place. you can only do that if you've got a platform that allows you to move between those locations without having to refactor or rewrite or spin up a whole number of skill sets.
Well, so I'll challenge you with that last bit, because you're always going to have to refactor, re-architect, and modernize, because life moves on. The architectures of 5 years ago are not the architectures deemed as modern today. And the wheel will continue and turn. So that problem's always going to exist, right?
Well, so unless you have a platform or a common operating layer that allows you to operate in those places as if they were the same. So whilst you would still, for example, look to modernize applications where possible using containers and getting the advantages of those things, being able to do that and write once and deploy many places is something that organizations should look to do. So using common platforms to help you do that.
But you could argue the same for data architectures, right? So we'll shift to the second part, right? Which is data architectures is it's a cliche to say data is just data. No, it ain't. It really ain't.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not as easy as people think, right?
Yeah. And I love the term of our data is the new oil. Kind of not, because data is infinite and it's only going to become more and more of it, right? So with modern data architectures, one of the most important things is in this new world where more data is being created in more places, where data is existing in different locations, and where I'm being asked as an organization to derive value from that data, having the ability to have governance or security, so knowing where my data is, who's touched it, what the lineage of that data is, as well as then being able to wrap that around some of what we refer to as the modern data architectures, starting with, I'll talk about the tech side of it first. So how do I use open data lakehouses so that I don't have to have multiple copies of structured and unstructured data and that I can collapse them into a single place? How do I provide an architecture that actually allows for me to have distributed data, but have a single and common security and governance? And the final non-technology piece is, and we were talking a little bit about something similar just before we started here around data mesh, which is not a technology. It's like a fundamental change in the way that you as an organization view data. So instead of IT being the bottleneck and being in control of what goes in and what comes out and how they serve it, you serve it back to the business units, whether that is a manufacturing plant, whether it's an actual business unit within your organization, whether it's a dealership if you're a car maker, and giving them the ability to own, monetize, and think about data as a product, connecting those things together and allowing it to serve the business.
Yeah, so I think my big beef around, when we talk around large data sets, I'm trying to avoid all the buzzwords very deliberately. I'm trying to use some English. Is that 70% of data after 3 months never gets looked at ever again. It's garbage. There is a sustainability impact to that. And the fact that we are retaining data, so we are consuming resources for no value whatsoever. There is a cost factor to that, but also there is a complexity factor, and there's a cultural factor of people saying, "Oh, but we might need it." Where are you at about data demotion and deletion, active deletion?
So managing your data or having control of your data, it starts at those basic pillars of understanding your data, where it is, what it's been used for, when was it last accessed, who has control over it. And if you live in a world where I have a data set on-prem or multiple data sets on-prem, I've spun something up in a public cloud, I'm using a SaaS provider to do something else, that becomes almost impossible to do, and you're never going to unify those things. When you so once you have that, the idea then of how you control that data becomes something you can manage. The one thing I will say is that, and we've been doing this for a while, right? So machine learning is not something new. It's been around, and there's been some amazing stuff done with it. The way that's powered is by huge data sets, right? So those data sets getting fed into that machine. You do as an organization, though, to your point, where possible, do not. I see so many organizations having to duplicate data sets because they're trying to move stuff around. Incredibly inefficient, incredibly costly. And actually, if we think about what's coming around the corner, or what the kind of era or technology place we're entering now, my gosh, you don't have time to worry about that. There's so many more things that you've kind of got on your plate.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm going to call it out, right? I think that's a bit of a cop-out, because fundamentally, we got to get rid of useless data. And if we look at, as we now move to data sets which are being leveraged and trained into either machine learning or now generative AI products, then those biases, those data errors, those erroneous sets are only going to compound another problem further down the line. And that's not even addressing the immediate cost and sustainability impact of today.
Yeah.
So, I'm really interested as to where, how you would go about helping a client actually address this issue.
Yeah, so the adage is true, right? Rubbish in, rubbish out. And so one of the huge things that we've seen organizations been doing for the last 2 to 3 years, whenever they embark on a real kind of machine learning type project, is having checks and balances in place that are people driven. So having working board groups that are made up of people from outside of their organization to check for bias, because you're quite right. There's no way that you can weed out some of those bad data sets. But again, if I have a holistic view of everything, if I understand where everything is and who's touched it, I've got a better chance. And therefore I could start to either archive data off, or I can move it off to a lower cost of storage, because actually I know I'm only going to bring it back. I'm only going to need it at a certain point and I can bring it back. But if you don't know what you've got, if you don't know where it is, it's almost impossible to do that.
So you've got to get brave and just start deleting.
Yes.
But here's a classic one. On a cloud economics perspective, people create CloudWatch logs on Amazon Web Services, and I say, okay, how old is it? Well, is it more than 90 days old? Yes. When was the last time you looked at a CloudWatch log for that particular workload? Or about a week ago? Should we go back to 30 days and delete the rest of them?
Yeah.
And that's just a huge amount of cost out. As well as sustainability impact. So that's where that's a very basic example. When we're talking about larger data sets of product data, of how many products have been shipped and that sort of stuff over a period of time.
Yeah.
Well, at what point is the pre-COVID data now irrelevant?
Yeah.
Or is it not?
Yep, exactly. And so one of the things we are definitely seeing is organizations, if I use that example of like product data, is how do I start to merge these data sets together? So I've kind of got manufacturer data, I've got production data, and then I've got data from after sale. How can I merge them together so that I can maybe predict that failure that's going to happen, or I can do something that's going to improve the customer service level when we go after? But there is no kind of easy answer to this, but there are some table stakes that you have to know, and it's that knowing where your data is, who's touched it, what access it has been had, and having a holistic view of all of those things.
Yeah, okay. So but let's go back to the whole machine learning and Gen AI story, right?
Yes.
So you said that you guys are looking at using, and you've got capabilities around that. Where's your view about the use of machine learning? I hesitantly use the term AI to interrogate data versus, are you guys doing stuff more about leveraging that data into large language modules, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, for business outcome? Where are you at on that scale?
Yeah, so we have within our platform, so we help organizations go and do machine learning. It's kind of bread and butter for us. So giving them a platform to go and then build their models and if we think about some of the amazing things that machine learning has done for us, the kind of standout example is imagery, so that you can pump through, scans from medical fields, and it can tell you with great certainty that actually this is probably the next thing you need to go and do, and let a doctor go and take it, speeding up that whole process. That's been going on for ages and ages. The new world based around LLMs, our position, let me rewind a bit, right? Because I think that we as an industry are, we've got to be careful, because everyone is now a Gen AI company, right? Everyone, regardless of actually what you've got or what you're selling. And the reason that could be a problem is I think it's really, really confusing for organizations out there to then try and differentiate what it is that I can do today and who do I go and get to do it.
It feels like the early days of cloud, right?
Exactly like the early days of cloud, where every CEO was walking out of the boardroom, all in, right? And we were going to move everything. And we kind of, as we just discussed, we know how that turned out. And so, the power of Gen AI, for no doubt, it's going to have a huge impact on us as society. If just looking at some of the stuff that's happened in the last couple of weeks, like Google DeepMind, they've managed to model proteins that you can then, using billions and billions and millions of dollars, right, an investment, they've kind of started to do some very incredible things that will make its way into the medical field, that will help to start to really have an impact on cancer or big diseases. And that's amazing, and we will do see more and more of that. For most organizations at the moment, when we talk about Gen AI, we're talking about chatbots, Copilot, we're talking about kind of call center screening, which are all completely valid, but we as an industry are maybe in danger of making it confusing for organizations to figure out what that means in order to figure out how to progress. And so it's super exciting. It's a good time to be in the industry. Are we in the next industrial revolution? I'm not so sure. We will be at some point, but it's not quite there. And everyone's a Gen AI company all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, my bold call on this is, before you even start out on these Gen AI LLMs, first of all, sort your data out.
Oh my gosh.
Secondly, put the business case together.
Yep.
And then work out about what you want to do with it.
For sure. And the LLMs thing, right? So the key with this is that when you do get to that point, you're not just going to have one LLM.
No.
You're going to have multiple. You're going to have open LLMs, you're going to have closed LLMs, you're going to have open LLMs that you've brought down and you've changed. And so we believe that one of the biggest challenges organizations will face moving forward is managing those. And so providing a capability to integrate with multiple LLMs, again, have that whole security and governance layer is important. But I see organizations talk about it as if, well, I'm just going to get one and it will do everything. And actually it depends on the industry, what you're trying to do, the use case, the business case, and that could get quite confusing.
I'm really worried about echo chamber bias.
Right.
Especially if you get LLMs where you have closed loops and open ones,
right,
and they are feeding into the same data sets. You can start getting echo chamber and that sort of stuff. So that's where my worry is.
There is, and I think if you're an organization starting out, there's some really, really good quick wins, right? So think about your developers or your data scientists. How can I make their life easier so that I can get humans focused on the actual more complicated tasks? So using that whole Copilot, getting kind of code automated so that it becomes something that the machines do quicker and that you can then just validate and implement. You still have to deal with the things you talked about, but these kind of wins that drive efficiency, potentially save money or improve, therefore, what those people that are not doing that can go and do. They're the kind of stuff. Chatbots as well, right? Obviously, the ability. ChatGPT showed every CEO and CIO and president across the world that how easy it was to do something with data. So they kind of went back into the boardroom and they're like, why can't I interrogate my sales data for the last 4 years and find and ask it questions so that it can tell me something useful? That's super powerful. But again, it only works, to your point, if I have control of my data, I know where it is, and I can access it, and I can wrap security and governance around it, because we've seen too many bad things happen where people have taken their data, they've thrown it into an open model, and all of a sudden they've breached company policy, and there's a problem.
Absolutely. So, nearly out of time. What's considering you're talking about hot topics and the rest of it, but what's your big trend you see that's going to happen in the market, especially around data and data analytics for the next 12, 24 months?
So I see organizations, the explosion of Gen AI, I see organizations recognizing they've got to sort their shop out. And so the implementation of those modern data architectures, data lakehouse, open data lakehouse, data fabric to support data mesh is a kind of cornerstone and table stakes of that. At the same time, kind of wrapping that security and governance layer. Once you've done that, the ability to then start exploring LLMs, start to think about how I can maybe improve life or make life easier, as we talked about, that's going to be it. But that in itself is a lot for the next kind of 12, 24 months. I also, we see more and more organizations wanting to have the capability to run in multiple clouds. Mm-hmm. So having the flexibility and choice, we need the cloud providers to kind of help us all by making it easier to move. But again, having a common operating layer or a single platform that allows you to do those things is a way to mitigate that risk. Great.
Paul, thank you very much. So there you have it. I think in summary, the key phrase from that is use the correct tools correctly. I've been Jez Back. Thank you very much for watching the Cloud Chronicles, and we'll see you on the next show.